You can see the PowerPoint presentation.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we were talking about basics of pain management, and also we learned about non-opioids and first and second step of WHO analgesic ladder. So now we will today we are going to talk about mainly about step 3 opioids, and what is the mechanism action of opioids, the practical aspects of opioid use, and side effect of opioids. Uh, so I'm not going to take it as a theory session. So this will be an interactive session, and I will be going through patient stories. So I expect some of you to answer this so that we can utilize the time up to 4 p.m. for discussing these patient stories. So we already saw the WHO analgesic ladder, which is the 3-step analgesic ladder, in which the second and third step contains opioids. The second step contains weak opioids or opioids for mild to moderate pain, and third step is the strong opioids or opioids for moderate to severe pain. So from this patient's photo and from his face, what can you read from his face? What is his expression on his face? Anybody?
That he is in severe pain, sir.
Okay. So he is in severe pain. So this is a patient who is 56-year-old with carcinoma of the larynx, and his main problem is pain around neck, and it is 10 by 10. That means worst imaginable pain. He is in severe pain, and it is a sharp pain. There is no radiation, and he was unable to sleep because of pain for the last 2 weeks. Suppose this patient attends your hospital or clinic. How will you manage this patient? Anybody? So a patient with severe pain.
So we have a chat from Dr. Neelima. We will go straight to step 3.
Okay.
Give opioids by Dr. Santiago.
Okay. So what opioid, which opioid in the step 3 will you use?
Morphine, sir.
Morphine. Okay. So how will you administer morphine?
No, sir, I have not administered.
Okay. Anybody?
Sir, Dr. Savitri says intravenous.
Okay. So Dr. Savitri, can you tell more about how will you administer intravenous morphine?
Hello, sir. Good afternoon.
Yeah.
Hello, sir.
Yes.
You can able to hear me.
Yeah. Yeah.
So actually, oral morphine we cannot provide, sir, because of CA larynx. So since he is in severe pain, so morphine we will start with a 2 mg starting dose stat, and then we can titrate 4th hourly or 6th hourly. According to that, we can repeat our dose. I think.
Okay. Is there any other thing in the chat, Rajashri?
Sir, one person named Redmi have said that the use of patch
Okay.
start with oral dose if he is able to swallow. Drip morphine 10 mg 24 hours within breakthrough 2 mg.
Okay. Thank you all. Thank you, Dr. Savitri.
Dr. Neelima have asked for what about intravenous infusion?
Okay. Thank you. So for this patient who was suffering from pain for the last 2 weeks, we can administer uh, morphine through any route, either orally or through intravenous. But if you have both preparations, it would be better if you can give it intravenously because it will give immediate pain relief. So, so you can see this patient after about 45 minutes, he is sitting up and smiling. So how this happens? This is by giving intravenous morphine trial or intravenous morphine titration. So how will you do intravenous morphine titration? So you will administer injection morphine 1.5 milligram at 10 minutes interval. So what is the immediate side effect that you are expecting when you administer morphine to an opioid naive patient? Anybody? What is the immediate side effect you are expecting with 1.5 milligram of intravenous morphine if the patient is opioid naive?
Nausea, vomiting.
Okay. So first you have to administer injection metoclopramide 10 milligram IV. And then you will give injection morphine 1.5 milligram at every 10 minutes interval. And what is the endpoint? Either the patient has satisfactory pain relief, it is satisfactory pain relief, or sleepiness, whichever be the first. So this is the endpoint, either satisfactory pain relief or sleepiness. So you can make this chart for administering intravenous morphine trial. So this patient suppose came at 10 a.m. He will chart his pulse rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, and he will ask the pain score. It is 10 by 10. And he will ask the patient, are you feeling sleepy or
Who will
not?
close the door?
Anybody want to ask anything? No? Okay. So you will look, is the patient drowsy or not? You will chart, no, the patient is not drowsy. Then you will administer injection morphine 1.5 milligram. And you will wait for 10 minutes. So at 10:10 a.m., you will look for, you will look pulse rate, respiratory rate, blood pressure, and you will ask the pain score. Now the pain score is 7. You will see is the patient drowsy or not. No, patient is not drowsy. You will again administer 1.5. So this patient received 3 doses of morphine, and at 10:30 a.m. the pain score is 1. Patient is not drowsy. So the patient has satisfactory pain relief, then you will stop. Okay, this is how you will give intravenous morphine trial. Suppose, okay, so this patient, is this procedure an inpatient procedure or outpatient procedure?
Inpatient.
Okay, we can do it on an outpatient basis. It will not cause any problem. So this patient received 4.5 milligram of IV morphine with good pain relief. So you want to send the patient home. So how will you convert this intravenous morphine into oral morphine? How much will you give this patient oral morphine? Anybody?
The 3 times IV dose by Dr. Edward.
Okay. Suppose this patient is an opioid naive patient. Then you can directly convert the IV morphine into oral morphine. Okay. So that's how we do here. So 4.5 milligram of IV morphine in an opioid naive patient is equal to 4.5 milligram of oral morphine. But from a practical point of view, the dose of morphine available, the lowest dose available for us is 10 milligram. So we cannot provide 4.5 milligram of oral morphine. We have to give 5 milligram. So you can see morphine is given 4 hourly. When the patient wakes up for 6 a.m., then at 10 a.m., then next dose at 2 p.m., 6 p.m., and at bedtime. We are not giving 2 a.m. dose. Instead, we are giving double dose at bedtime. So this is how morphine is usually administered. So you need not wake up the patient at 6 a.m. to administer morphine. And because most of the patients who are in pain will be sleeping in the morning time. So whenever the patient wakes up, let them take the first dose. But from the next dose onwards, you will keep the regular timings. And in addition, you can also give an SOS dose of morphine. Okay. So in an opioid naive patient, we can convert the IV morphine directly to oral morphine. We need not multiply by 3. But in case of patients who already are on opioids, other opioids, then the conversion is little complicated, but as a general principle, it is 2 to 3 times of IV morphine. So if you don't have intravenous morphine or injection morphine, then you may have to go for an oral morphine trial. So in an oral morphine trial, if the patient is opioid naive, you can start the patient directly on 5 milligram morphine 4 hourly and SOS. But if the patient is already on weak opioids like tramadol, you can directly start on 10 milligram 4 hourly and SOS. Rajlakshmi, please keep it on chat. I see many.
Sir, doctor was asking about what is meant by opioid naive,
Okay.
because she haven't used opioids before.
Okay. Opioid naive means the person has not taken opioid previously, or he's not on opioids as of now.
Sir, one other question is, if he wakes up at 9 a.m. and we give a dose of morphine, can we give next dose at 10 a.m.?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
If we wakes up at 9 a.m. and we give a dose of morphine, can we give the next dose at 10 a.m.?
Okay, for that question, we have another question coming in this, so we will answer that.
Okay, sir.
Okay. So our patient, Mr. X, we started him on 5 milligram of morphine 4 hourly and SOS because he took only 4.5 milligram of IV morphine. So we converted it into 5 milligram of oral morphine. And he was relatively pain-free for the last 2 weeks. But then he needed about 4 doses per day for the last 4 days. So what shall we do now? He needs more than what we have prescribed. He's taking more SOS doses. So what are you going to do for this patient? Anybody? You can unmute yourself and speak.
Can you hear me, sir?
Yes.
His pain requirement has increased.
Yeah.
So we'll have to increase the dose of morphine for him.
Okay. So how much will you increase, Dr. Nilima?
It was started at 5, maybe we'll make it 10.
Okay. Thank you. Yeah. So when will you increase the dose of morphine? So if the patient is taking 2 or more than required dose, that is 2 or more SOS dose, PRN is same as SOS dose, then you will increase the dose of morphine by 30 to 50%. So this patient is taking 4 SOS doses. So we can, that's an indication to increase the dose of morphine. So how much? 30 to 50%. In this patient, he's taking 5 milligram. So if you take 30% of 5 milligram, that means 1.5. So total will be 6.5. 6.5, it is not practically feasible to give 6.5. Then the nearest dose possible is 50% increase. So 50% of 5 is 2.5. So we will increase morphine from 5 milligram to 7.5 milligram. Or even some patient, it will be difficult to break the morphine into 4 pieces. And in that instances, you can even give 10 milligram in this patient. So it is 30 to 50% increase. Even you can increase the dose of morphine every 24 to 36 hours. You need not wait 2 to 3 days. It will take only 5 doses to get the blood level stabilized. So you can increase the dose of morphine by every 24 to 36 hours. So how frequently would you give SOS dose of morphine if you are giving morphine orally, and why? Anybody?
Excuse me.
So, hello.
Yeah.
So we'll have to give the doses in between to control the breakthrough pain in order to maintain the continuity of pain relief.
Okay.
So we have to give him SOS doses in case the increased dose is not sufficing.
So how frequently, if you want to give, suppose the previous question, 9 a.m. the patient took morphine, then can we give at 10 a.m. or if the patient has pain at 9:30 a.m., can we give morphine?
I think so, we can.
Okay. Okay. For this, we have to understand the pharmacology, little bit pharmacology of morphine. So you can see this plant, which is known as Papaver somniferum. That's the scientific name of the plant from which we get morphine, or it is known as poppy plant. And this plant is usually grown in only 3 states of India, legally grown in 3 states of India, that is UP, MP, and Rajasthan. And you can see the farmer is making cuts on the pod, that is known as pod. This is pod, okay, and they are making small cuts on the pod, and you can see the sap is coming out. They will collect this sap, dry it in sunlight, and this will be transported to government opium and alkaloid factories, and from where this sap is converted into powder form from which we can make morphine. So this is Papaver somniferum or poppy plant. And actually, all the parts of this plant are rich in morphine. But the most abundant source of morphine is the pod. So morphine, little bit of pharmacokinetics. Morphine is a weak base, and it is absorbed from the upper small bowel. And it is morphine is hydrophilic. So hydrophilic means it is water soluble. So because of its water solubility, it has a slow onset of action, but at the same time, it has a longer duration of action. And there are many routes which the people advise for administering morphine, but sublingual, buccal, or gingival route will not be good for morphine because its absorption through this route is very low, and practically this may not be useful. You have to also understand that morphine is bitter. So if you crush the morphine tablet, you have to sweeten it and then administer. Otherwise, the patient will have bitter taste. If you give morphine orally, what happens? So it will go into the GI tract, and it will be absorbed from the upper small bowel into the blood vessels. From the blood vessels of this upper small bowel, it will go into the portal vein, and from portal vein to liver, where metabolism takes place. And after metabolism, the metabolites are liberated into the systemic circulation. So morphine is mainly metabolized in liver, but a minor part is also metabolized in GIT and kidney. Okay. And morphine is converted mainly 90% of morphine is converted into metabolites, and only 10% bypasses the liver. And out of this 90%, the main metabolites produce the morphine 3 glucuronide and morphine 6 glucuronide. You can see morphine 3 glucuronide is produced in large quantity, whereas morphine 6 glucuronide is produced in small quantity. The morphine 6 glucuronide, it is the active component which will give you the pain relief. Morphine 3 glucuronide doesn't give any pain relief. So the component which is produced in small quantity is the one which will give you the pain relief. So now tell me, what do you think about this? How frequently? Is it minutes or hour or hours?
Dr. Shubhra have commented too early.
Too early.
Too hourly.
2 hourly. Okay. Okay. So, as I told you earlier, the morphine has to be swallowed. It goes into the GI tract, from where it is absorbed into the portal vein and to the liver, where metabolism takes place, and metabolites are liberated into the systemic circulation, and this metabolites will give you the pain relief. So, this pain relief will start by half an hour, but the maximum action is by 1 hour. So it is better to give morphine every hourly as an SOS dose if the patient wants. So the previously asked question, 9 a.m. if the patient is taking morphine, and you can give at 10 a.m. The difference between the 2 doses of morphine should be 1 hour. So our patient, Mr. X, his pain now he was stabilized at 10 milligram 4 hourly. We started him on 5 milligram morphine, but because of SOS doses, we increased the morphine to 10 milligram. Now he is taking 10 milligram 4 hourly. But he tells you that, doctor, I need to take this tablet every 4 hourly from 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. I don't want to take it like this. And along with this, I have a load of medication. Will you allow me to take it less frequently? So what will you do?
Use sustained release tablet.
Okay, sustained release tablet. So what is the duration of action of a sustained release tablet?
The 12 hours is that?
Okay, so
12 hours.
yeah, that's correct. So the duration of action of sustained release tablet is 12 hours, whereas immediate release morphine or fast acting tablet is 4 hours. So this patient, if we have sustained release morphine, we can convert this total morphine into 2 daily doses. He is taking 10 milligram 4 hourly. That means this patient is taking 60 milligram in 24 hours. 10 milligram into 6 doses. That is 60 milligram. So if you have sustained release tablet of 30 milligram, you can administer 30 milligram BD. Okay. So tab morphine, sustained release, 30 milligram BD. So what are the preparations, usual preparations of morphine available? Syrup or active solutions are available. Tablets, as we told, immediate release and controlled release tablets are available. Injections are available. The strength is variable from state to state and in the countries. We have 15 milligram of morphine in 1 ml, which is 1 ampule. So now our patient is still on 10 milligram morphine 4 hourly for the past 6 months. But then he was brought to you by a caregiver, and they were telling you that he has excessive drowsiness for the past few days. And you thought, okay, I will investigate to find out the problem of this excessive drowsiness. They were also telling he is speaking, he doesn't recognize people at times, and his speech is not relevant, etc. And when you um, investigated, you found that he has a serum creatinine of 5 milligrams per deciliter. So do you need to do anything with morphine dosage?
Yeah, we have to decrease the dose of the morphine because patient is having high creatine level.
Okay. So what does that mean?
Because morphine is excreted by the kidneys also. So kidneys, creatine is 5 milligram. So probably there is a accumulation of morphine, and that is why causing the drowsiness. So we have to reduce the dose.
Yeah, you are correct. So morphine and its metabolites are excreted by glomerular filtration. And in case of renal failure, the morphine 6 glucuronide, it accumulates, and this will cause symptoms of toxicity like drowsiness, delirium, and even it can cause convulsions. So it is important to reduce the dose of morphine. So from 10 milligram, you may make it TID or 6 hourly or even BD or once daily as per the dose of creatinine. Or you have to switch it to an alternate opioid, which is renally safe, like fentanyl or methadone. Okay, so for this patient, we can give maybe 5 milligram 8 hourly orally. He was on 10 milligram 4 hourly, but because of his excessive drowsiness and delirium, we are decreasing the dose of morphine to 5 milligram, and also we are spacing the dose. Instead of 4 hourly, we are giving it 8 hourly now. Okay. And now our patient, we found that 5 milligram 8 hourly is good enough for pain relief, and we send him home. But after 2 months, you get a phone call from his caregiver saying that he is unable to swallow anything, including morphine. Even water is not going in. And they tried to put a IELTS too, but it was not possible. And they also told that he was very much comfortable with 5 milligram morphine 8 hourly. And they wanted you to do something. So what will you do? Anybody?
So Dr. Nilima said morphine patch.
Or you can go for a buccal route. Buccal route.
Morphine patch. Morphine patch is not available. As per my knowledge, it is not available anywhere. Buccal route. So we, yeah, that is it.
Sir, can we change to other fentanyl transdermal patch or something like that?
Okay. Rajlakshmi, were you telling anything?
We have many chat on fentanyl patch.
Mm-hmm.
And Dr. Edward has said some to crushed on below tongue MIR. Can you explain?
Yeah, I understood. Okay. So sublingually or buccal or gingival, these are the routes through which morphine is not very effective. And the literature says if after sublingual or buccal administration, if the patient has pain relief, it is because the patient has swallowed the morphine. So it is not very wise to administer morphine sublingually or buccally or gingivally. What else can be done? Fentanyl patch.
So will we,
Yeah.
so will we have to get back to a continuous subcutaneous infusion?
Yeah.
So that.
Yeah, that's a good option. But the problem is that patient is at home and you will not be able to give injection morphine probably. So if you have injection morphine, you can send it and teach the caregivers how to administer. But if otherwise, what will you do with morphine? And there is no option for fentanyl patch because this dose is very low to put a fentanyl patch. Anybody? What are the routes through which you can administer morphine?
Any role of rectal route, rectal, parectal?
Okay, so let's see. The morphine can be administered either intravenously or subcutaneously, orally, parectally. Morphine can be given parectally, epidurally, and intrathecally. Okay, so these are the routes through which you can administer morphine. So for our patient with 5 milligram 8 hourly, we can administer morphine parectally. Okay. So which morphine can be administered parectally? It is the fast-acting tablet. As I told you earlier, morphine is hydrophilic. So you can take 5 milligram tablet pour 2 drops of water and you make it a paste and then you put it into the rectal mucosa. If the patient had pain relief, good pain relief with 5 milligram 8 hourly, then if you administer same dose through rectal route, you will get the same pain relief. So oral route and parectal route are comparable. Okay, this is what you can do for this patient. And injectable morphine can be given if your institution allows to see the patient at his home and administer and to teach the caregiver how to administer, etc.
Subcute is an option, no, sir?
Yeah, subcutaneous is an option, but this patient is at home. So will you be able to, will your institution allow injection morphine to be given to patient who is at home?
No, sir, not morphine. Any other drugs except morphine. Correct.
Okay, okay. So that's the problem. So that's why I am telling that morphine can be administered parectally, and it is effective. It is not like sublingual or gingival or buccal route. The absorption is very predictable. It is comparable to oral route. Okay.
Dr. Neelima have asked, sir, is it allowed to give injection morphine at home?
Okay, so there is no such hard and fast rule, but one thing is important that you have to break the ambule and load it in a syringe. Don't give ambules as such because there is a chance of some legal problems may come across or some other problems can occur. So it will be better to break the ambule, load it in a syringe, and then give it to patient. So that's what we do usually. Okay. Okay. Now we are coming to another patient. So we left the patient X. Now our patient Mrs. K, sorry, Mr. K, that's my mistake. 55-year-old man with carcinoma of the colon has abdominal pain, continuous on 10 milligram morphine 4 hourly. And he doesn't require any SOS dose of morphine. So this patient is on 10 milligram morphine 4 hourly. A doctor has asked them to replace this morphine with a 25 microgram fentanyl patch. It is fentanyl patch, okay. Next day, the patient reports to you telling that They replaced the fentanyl patch after 5 hours as she had no pain relief. So what will you do? So a patient who was on 10 milligram morphine every 4 hourly, and because he had very good pain relief, the doctor advised him to convert it into a 25 microgram fentanyl patch. But the patient's caregiver tells you that they didn't get any pain relief from the fentanyl patch. So they replaced the fentanyl patch after 5 hours. So what are you going to do for this patient? Rayalakshmi, something has come in chat.
So Dr. Rashmi has commented the start of pain relief is expected to start after 24 hours.
Okay,
So hence continue with the patch.
okay. What are the other comments?
Continue
You might have
morphine
to give
count.
some adjunctive. You might have to give some.
Yeah, tell me.
Yes, Dr. Geetika.
So we might have to add an adjunctive analgesic till the time we achieve analgesia by the fentanyl patch.
Okay,
Just to
you want to add an adjuvant analgesic. Okay.
So continue morphine counseling for use and effect of fentanyl patch. Another comment, continue morphine and bind with fentanyl. Switch over to oral route.
Okay. Okay, let's see something about fentanyl patch. Okay, fentanyl is available as injections. It is available as transdermal fentanyl patch and as oral transmucosal fentanyl citrate. That is a lollipop. That is short form is OTFC, oral transmucosal fentanyl citrate. But compared to morphine, fentanyl is lipophilic, whereas morphine is hydrophilic. And these are something you have to understand about transdermal fentanyl patch. Fentanyl patch, if you apply a particular strength fentanyl patch, suppose it is 12.5 microgram or 25 microgram patch, that means that much amount of fentanyl will be liberated every hourly. If you apply 12.5 microgram patch, that means 12.5 microgram fentanyl will be liberated every hourly. You will not be able to alter the concentration of the fentanyl liberated into the circulation. So it is always constant. Suppose the patient has pain which is not stabilized on morphine. Patient is taking 10 milligram now, but after 1 hour patient need another dose of morphine. Then after 3 hours he is taking again, and maybe after 2 hours taking again. So the pain is not stabilized. If the pain is stabilized, then he only need to take it every 4 hours. So fentanyl patch is not suitable for patients whose pain is not stabilized. So, but our patient who is on 10 milligram of morphine 4 hourly, he doesn't require any SOS dose. That means this patient's pain is stabilized. So this patient's morphine can be converted into fentanyl patch. 60 milligram of oral morphine will be equivalent to 25 microgram patch, fentanyl patch. And once you apply the fentanyl patch, first it will produce a subcutaneous tissue depot. This will take about 8 to 12 hours. And after this formation of subcutaneous tissue depot, fentanyl is liberated into the systemic circulation. So for the first 8 to 12 hours, you will not have pain relief even if you apply the fentanyl patch. But what our patient did, he replaced the fentanyl patch after 5 hours telling there is no pain relief. So for the first 8 to 12 hours, you have to use the same opioid which you were using previously. And then only you can discontinue that opioid. And the duration of action of fentanyl patch is 3 days, 72 hours. And you have to, when you apply the patch, you should not shave the area because it will produce some abrasion, and this will increase the absorption. Temperature will also increase the absorption. So fentanyl patch is not suitable for patients who has unstable pain. We will move on to another patient, Mr. H. Mr. H, 70-year-old man with carcinoma of the lung, has neuropathic pain of right upper limb due to nerve infiltration. He is on morphine 10 milligram 4 hourly, amitriptyline 75 milligram HS, and pregabalin 150 milligram BD. He attends your clinic with a delirium and myoclonus and doesn't have satisfactory pain relief. How will you manage this patient? So a patient who is on 60 milligram of morphine along with 75 milligram amitriptyline and 300 milligram of pregabalin. So how will you manage this patient's pain? He doesn't have satisfactory pain relief. Instead, he has some delirium, myoclonus, etc. How will you manage this patient?
Can you go for nerve blocks?
Yeah, that's an option for those, people who do nerve blocks will be very less. You have to get a pain physician or an anesthetist. What else can be done?
Sir, adjuvant benzodiazepines.
Benzodiazepines, it will not be a good option in this patient because he already has delirium. And if you give benzodiazepine, that is going to worsen the delirium and it will not help the patient much.
So Dr. Ravindra said carbamazine.
Carbamazepine. Okay. But he's already on an anticonvulsant pregabalin. So adding carbamazepine may not be an option, but that can be tried. What else?
So lidocaine topical gel.
Okay, lidocaine, it's patch, lidocaine patch. Okay, patch is applied on a small area, but this patient has pain on the right upper limb, all along the right upper limb. So lidocaine patch is not an option.
So other chats are ketamine, increased dose of pregabalin.
Okay. Why this patient has delirium and myoclonus? Anybody?
Higher dose of amitriptyline.
Okay, this patient has delirium and myoclonus is an indication of opioid toxicity. Okay, so what can be done in this patient? We can use methadone. Okay, methadone is introduced into Indian market about 2 years back. So methadone is an isomer of S-methadone and R-methadone. And you can see it acts on all the opioid receptors as an agonist, mu, kappa, and delta. And in addition to this opioid agonistic activity, it also acts as an NMDA antagonist, which is like ketamine. And then it has also an additional action like tricyclic antidepressant. It inhibits the reuptake noradrenaline and serotonin. So all these three actions are going to help in neuropathic pain, but it has another action which makes it a bad medicine for people because it inhibits HCRG, that means human ether agogo related gene. It is more abundant in the myocardium. So when HCRG blockade happens, it will prolong the QT interval and it can produce Torsades points, and that will lead on to sudden death. But this usually occurs when the patients are on high doses of methadone, and the HCRG blockade and Torsades points are more common in patients who are on substitution therapy for opioids with methadone. So most of the studies are conducted in patients with methadone substitution therapy for opioid addiction. So that's where QT interval prolongation and Torsades points are described. But the doses which we need to give pain relief will be less than 50 milligram of methadone per day. That usually will not produce any problems. QT interval prolongation. So something I will give you a brief account of regarding methadone. And when you administer methadone, it will appear in the blood for about 2 to 4 hours. And after administration, what happens? This will go into the tissues, inside the tissues, and where it will be bind in the tissue binding sites. And when this tissue binding sites saturated, what happens? Then that methadone, when you administer methadone continuously, after saturation, some of the methadone will be coming into the bloodstream. So for saturation of tissue binding sites, it will take about 5 to 7 days. So once you administer methadone, it will take about 5 to 7 days for proper pain relief. So you have to wait till 5 to 7 days. Okay, so 5 to 7 days. And methadone is excreted mainly by bowel. So it is safe in renal failure. If you want to know more about methadone, in Indian Journal of Palliative Care, there is a supplement on methadone. And also, please read this article, Safe and Appropriate Use of Methadone in Hospice and Palliative Care, Expert Consensus White Paper. So this is the flowchart for using methadone, which we use in our home care or OP settings. Most important thing about methadone is that if there is no reliable caregiver to administer methadone, it will not be good to start methadone, because methadone is not like morphine. We have to be very careful. Even if instead of 5 milligram of morphine, if you give 10 milligram, it may not cause any problem, much problem. But if you administer methadone wrongly, then the effect will be long lasting. And then if the patient has a reliable caregiver, you will ask, are there any history of sudden unexplained death in the family? Because Torsades points will manifest like sudden death. And if there is a congenital prolonged QT syndrome, you will not start methadone unless the patient is end of life. But if there is no history of sudden and unexplained death, then usually before starting methadone, if you look at the white paper, they advise to take ECG, look for QT interval, look for electrolytes, calcium, sodium, potassium, etc., and many other investigations. But this is more, you need to go for all this if the patient is on high dose methadone. Otherwise, we usually don't take ECGs. So no need of ECG. Check QT interval. The QTC is corrected QT interval, if possible after 1 week. No need to stop present medication. Why this is? Because many medications can have interaction with methadone. The medications which we usually use in palliative care usually interact with methadone. So many people are concerned about interaction, but that is not going to be a problem, because we use very small dose of methadone. And once after that, if the patient is on less than 60 milligram of oral morphine per day, then you can give 2 to 7.5 milligram per day of methadone. 1 minute. if the patient is on oral morphine of 60 to 199 milligram per day, then and the patient, if the patient is less than 65 years, you can have a conversion ratio of 10:1. That is, if the oral morphine is 100 milligram, then 100 divided by 10. So that is 10 milligram of methadone per day. So you can give 5 milligram BD. And if the patient is more than 65 years, it is 20:1. And morphine dose, if it is more than 200 milligram per day, whatever be the age, then conversion ratio is 20:1. I will be sending this PowerPoint. Okay, if you start patient on methadone, the important things you have to understand is it is not like morphine. It will take about 5 to 7 days for stabilization. So don't increase the dose of methadone till 5 to 7 days. And there are many medications which can interact with methadone. So you have to be little careful. And you also need to get a history of unexplained death in the family, or if the also ask for a history of congenital prolonged QT syndrome. And you also need to be aware of the conversion ratio of methadone. So this is the methadone. It is available as syrup as well as tablet. Armeth, that's the trade name. Tablet is 5 milligram and syrup is 1 ml containing 5 milligram. Okay, now we'll move on to some other questions. So this is Mr. P, 70-year-old man, has carcinoma of the lung and is complaining of throbbing pain on right front of chest, continuous 5/10. He is a non-epileptic and is on phenytoin 100 milligram BD. How will you manage his pain? So patient has a moderate pain, 5/10. He is a non-epileptic. So how will you manage the pain? Anybody? Or what medication should not be used? Which
Methadone can be tried.
Sorry, I didn't get.
No, methadone.
Methadone.
Yeah.
Okay. This patient with 5/10 pain, I may not use methadone.
Can we start with milder opioids like tramadol? Begin with.
Okay. So this, yeah.
Tramadol should not be used because the patient is already having epileptic. So tramadol causes sometimes convulsion.
Yeah. So that's what I wanted to tell you from this patient story. Tramadol should not be used if the patient has a history of convulsion, or if the patient are prone to have convulsion like brain metastasis, or patients who are on medications which can lower the seizure threshold. So it is better to avoid, because tramadol can reduce the seizure threshold and it will precipitate seizure. So you can use some other opioids. This is another patient who is on 50 milligram of morphine 4 hourly. She attends your clinic with severe pain. You have injection pentazocine and oral morphine tablet. How will you manage? Which one will you use? Injection pentazocine or oral morphine? Pentazocine is 420.
Again, oral morphine.
What is in the chat, Ralishmi?
Oral morphine, sir.
Oral morphine.
Why oral morphine? You want? Do you want to give faster pain relief or?
Severe.
Sir, pentazocine is an agonist antagonist.
So? So what is the problem with agonist and antagonist? What is in the chat, Rajashmi?
So Dr. Ravindra said SR28 early.
Sustained release morphine, 20 milligram, 8 hourly.
8 early.
Okay.
Injectable pentazocine is better over oral morphine.
Okay. So let's see what can be given. Is it pentazocine or morphine? So before going on to that, we already talked about Sita and Rama. Now we are asking what is the relationship between them. Okay, we already finished Ramayana. Okay, so now we'll talk about what is an opioid. So a medication to be qualified as an opioid, it should have the following. It should produce its effect by combining with opioid receptors, and its action should be antagonized by naloxone. These are the two properties for a medicine to become an opioid. And as I told you, mu, kappa, and delta are the opioid receptors. And it can be found everywhere in the nervous system, not only in the central nervous system, but also in the peripheral nervous system. And based on the interaction with the receptor, opioids are classified into three: agonist, antagonist, agonist, and agonist. Agonist means this medication will bind to the opioid receptors and will produce the physiological effect. The physiological effect is pain relief. So if you administer an opioid agonist like morphine, this is the dose of, on x-axis is the dose and y-axis is the pain. And if you give this much, that is a small amount of morphine, you will get this much pain relief. And you increase the dose of morphine, you will get corresponding pain relief. Theoretically, you should get 100% pain relief when you give this much dose of morphine. So you can see there is no ceiling effect. As you increase the dose of agonist, you will get corresponding pain relief. That means there is no ceiling effect for analgesia. So most of the agonist, most of the opioids which you know come under agonist: morphine, codeine, fentanyl, tramadol, etc., methadone. And antagonist means it doesn't have an action if you inject it into the body of an opioid naive patient. So if I administer naloxone or antagonist to you, if you are not taking any opioids, there is no action. It will act only in presence of an opioid. If you are taking morphine, then antagonist will reverse the effect of morphine. So you will have more pain. Naloxone and naltrexone are two examples. And agonist antagonist means, agonist antagonist examples are pentazocine and buprenorphine. Okay, so the first graph which we already saw, and the second one, you can see this is agonist and agonist. So when you increase the dose of agonist and agonist, up to a point that will give pain relief. You can see as you increase the dose of agonist and agonist, till this point, you will get corresponding pain relief. But even after this, even if you increase the dose of agonist and agonist like pentazocine, it is not going to give you pain relief. The curve plateaus. So this is the main difference between agonist antagonist and agonist. Agonist antagonist have ceiling effect for analgesia. So this is known as ceiling effect for analgesia. So pentazocine, it acts as an agonist at a kappa receptor, and it is a weak antagonist at a mu receptor, whereas morphine is a pure mu agonist. So if you administer pentazocine, what happens? Morphine is an agonist at mu, whereas pentazocine is an antagonist, weak antagonist at mu. So, sorry. So pentazocine will displace morphine from the mu. And now the pain relief is due to kappa receptor. The opioids which acts on mu receptor is the potent opioids. Okay. So instead of pain relief, this is going to increase the pain. So pentazocine is not an option here. you have to administer morphine itself. So we will be talking about side effects of opioids. What are the side effects? These are the adverse effects with therapeutic doses. Examples, the usual side effects: constipation, nausea, vomiting, sleepiness, and tiredness. Then there are rare side effects like itching, dry mouth, urinary hesitancy. Constipation is the most common problem, and it occurs in 95% of patients, and it will last as long as the patient is on morphine. So if you write a prescription for opioids, you have to write a regular stimulant laxative. It is stimulant laxative like disocodyl has to be prescribed along with opioids, and it has to be continued. And nausea and vomiting occurs in almost 33% of patients, but it is self-limiting. So after 3 to 5 days, this will be self-limiting, and it is mainly due to stimulation of chemoreceptor trigger zone. So you can use D2 receptor antagonists like haloperidol, metoclopramide, domperidone, or 5-HT3 antagonists like ondansetron, granisetron, etc. And sleepiness and tiredness is also self-limiting. And give more than required dose of opioid, that is going to produce some adverse effects which are known as toxic effects. So if the dose of morphine or any other opioids is more than the required, it will produce toxic effects. These are delirium, myoclonus, and excessive drowsiness. And this will be one of the questions in your minds. Are opioids going to cause respiratory depression? So this is a systematic review in 2003, which says the patients takes their medication by mouth, and this is usually opioids are gradually increased in dose, which ensures that respiratory depression is unusual. Okay, so it is not very common to have respiratory depression, especially if the patient is on oral morphine. And if the respiratory compromise does occur, you should seek an alternative explanation like pneumonia, pulmonary embolism, or cardiomyopathy, or co-administration with another sedating medication such as benzodiazepine. Okay, so this will be another concern, opioid causing addiction. So the main problem is the misconception of or the people doesn't understand the difference between psychological addiction, which is known as addiction, psychological dependence, and physical dependence. So psychological dependence is known as addiction. Okay. And addiction is actually described as a disease. You can see it is a disease, neurobiologic disease with genetic predisposition. So if you have a gene which can predispose to addiction, and if your environment is favorable, then you have a chance of becoming an addict. And this addiction is manifested by impaired control over drug use. And you know that this is not taken for a prescribed purpose. It will give you some other advantage. And you know that it is going to cause harm to you, but still you would continue to use that. But physical dependence means if you continue to use medications, suppose beta blocker, if you suddenly stop, it is going to increase the heart rate, it will cause perspiration, etc. So likewise, if you continue, if the patient is on continuous opioid, when you stop suddenly, it can cause withdrawal syndrome. So if the patient is on more than 1 month on morphine, don't stop it abruptly. You have to reduce the dose, taper it, and gradually stop. And this is very important from a pharmacoeconomic point of view, and because if you prescribe fentanyl patch or tramadol for a patient who is very poor, you have to understand the comparison of the price. If the patient is on 5 milligram morphine 4 hourly, total dose is 30 milligram. It will cost only about 3 rupees 50 paise per day. For the same dose tramadol, you have to, for the same pain relief, you have to give 300 milligram of tramadol, which will cost about 24 to 50 rupees. Whereas corresponding fentanyl patch, 12.5 microgram, will cost about 250 to 400 rupees. And methadone will be about 5 milligram, which will require 4 rupees 50 paise. And that's about opioids. We had a very good discussion regarding this during our presentation, but if you want to ask any quick questions, please.
Sir, can you hear me?
Yes.
Sir, can you just explain that conversion between morphine and methadone? In the chart, you had said 10:1. I didn't quite understand that.
Okay. If the dose of oral morphine
So
is
can you just
less
show
than,
that thing also while you're just, if it's possible?
so this is it. If the patient is less than taking less than 60 milligram, you can use 2 to 7.5 milligram of methadone per day. And if the patient is 60 to, if taking 60 to 199 milligram of oral morphine equivalent, and if the patient is less than 65 years, conversion rate is 10:1. Suppose it is 100 milligram of morphine, then you have to divide it by 10 because it is between 60 to 199. So it will be 10 milligram of methadone.
Okay, 10 milligram of methadone. This oral morphine equivalent is morphine only, sir?
Yeah. Suppose if the patient is on fentanyl, you have to convert it into morphine. That's why it is written as oral morphine equivalent.
Okay, any drug you're taking, you convert to.
Yeah.
And that conversion of fentanyl to morphine, how do you do, sir?
So 12.60 milligram of oral morphine is equivalent to 25 microgram of fentanyl. So it is 100 times more potent. But if you take that 100 times, it will be difficult to calculate. That's why to remember, 60 milligram of oral morphine is equivalent to 25 microgram of fentanyl.
Okay, so if you're taking 100 milligram of morphine, it's 100 by 10, that is 10 milligrams of methadone that you take.
Yeah.
Okay, and you stop morphine immediately.
Yeah, when you start methadone, you will stop morphine and make it 4-hourly SOS dose.
Okay.
So suppose the patient on 100 milligram of morphine, you convert it into 5 milligram methadone, tab methadone 5 milligram BD, and tab morphine 15 milligram Q 4-hourly SOS.
15 milligram Q.
It is
Q
90
4-hourly SOS.
Yeah.
So that is 90 milligrams.
Yeah.
Okay, and then when can you stop this morphine?
You can maybe after 5 to 7 days, the patients usually for the first 1 or 2 days, the patient may require SOS dose. But after 3-4 days, usually patient may not require any morphine.
Okay. After 1 or 2 days, more morphine will be required. Okay.
Not 1 or 2 days, maybe 3 to 5 days.
3 to 5 days to morphine required. Yeah. So, and you will give this SOS dose even if the patient is drowsy. Like we had one question where patient was drowsy, and that is why we were converting to methadone. So even if they're drowsy, you will give the SOS dose, or?
When you stop morphine, usually the drowsiness will disappear with methadone.
Okay.
So that will automatically reduce the drowsiness. Then you are giving only SOS dose of morphine.
So they said morphine stop immediately when you stop the drowsiness will stop immediately when you stop morphine, or it takes like how long approximately will it take for the drowsiness to go when you're on morphine? And
maybe within 24 hours.
Okay. Okay, thank you, sir.
Welcome.
Sir, could you please repeat the management of the epileptic patient once more?
Okay, so the patient, when you give tramadol, tramadol has a tendency to reduce the seizure threshold. So what happens is patient is already epileptic. So when you give tramadol, there is a chance to precipitate seizure. But this is more common with intravenous tramadol, and if you give a fast intravenous push. Usually it may not occur with, I haven't seen during the last 16 years of my palliative care career. But theoretically it is possible.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
So Dr. Shirley have asked, when do we consider morphine IV?
Okay, if any patient with severe pain and if you want to give immediate pain relief, intravenous route is better. And sometimes what happens is patients on oral morphine can have severe pain because sometimes because of the problem with the metabolism in the liver, more of morphine 3-glucuronide is produced and less of morphine 6-glucuronide. So when you convert these patients into intravenous or subcutaneous morphine, then there is a chance for better pain relief. If the patient has continuous nausea, vomiting, then you can also consider intravenous or subcutaneous morphine.
Sir, irrespective of whether it's oral or IV, the metabolism is the same. Sir, what is the difference between IV and oral metabolism?
Okay, so what happens is when you administer morphine orally, it goes into the liver. About 90% of morphine goes through the liver. Once it is metabolized in the liver, the metabolites are liberated into the systemic circulation. But when you administer intravenously, it is directly into the systemic circulation. So 100% morphine is bioavailable. So what is bioavailability? Bioavailability is the percentage of medication which is available in the systemic circulation for action. When you administer morphine intravenously, 100% morphine is bioavailable. But when you administer morphine orally, only 10% of morphine is available, bioavailable. So that's the difference between oral and intravenous route.
Sir, but the active component is the 6-glucuronide, right? You are told as the morphine 6-glucuronide.
That is when you that is when you give orally.
IV it directly becomes like that, the active ingredient. Huh?
Yeah, active ingredient mainly will be morphine.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir. So can we move on to our case presentation and then come back to
Yes.
Dr. Karpagavalli?
Yes, I'll just share the presentation. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Is the presentation seen?
Yes, you can start your presentation.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dr. Karpagavalli, working as a professor and head in the Department of Oral Medicine and Radiology from Seema Dental College and Hospital, Rishikesh. Today, I am going to present a case which I came across maybe 2.5 years back, as I had accompanied one of the other faculty and the home care nurse to a patient who was given home care, that is palliative care, and who was attended regularly by a home care nurse, and I had just gone along with this team as an observer during my certificate course on, as I had just completed the certificate course on palliative care by IAPC. So today I'm presenting you a patient who's 58 years old, female, and the diagnosis of the patient was CA breast with metastasis and secondary infection. The presenting complaints of the patient was the patient had complained or presented with a lump in the right breast around 1 year ago. And around 6 months back, the patient had presented with an ulcer adjacent to the lump or in the same breast with a discharge. And for the past 1 month, the patient was complaining of severe back pain. Going on to the history of illness, 1 year ago, the patient had noticed a lump in the right breast, and which was initially small and had gradually progressed in size. And 6 months later, patient developed pain in the same breast or in the lump. You could say that in the lump, and it was initially gradual in onset, but the pain was continuous and it was of moderate intensity. And later the pain started radiating to the axilla and was aggravated on, patient said that whenever the patient moved the arm or was lying on the right side, the pain was more actually. So it was aggravated on moving the arm and on lying on the right side. The patient also noticed an ulceration in the breast adjacent to the area, in the right breast adjacent to the areolar region around 3 months ago, which was severely painful. And initially it was even foul smelling and a little bit fungating. But when I had seen the patient had had a few weeks of home care dressing. And the patient had, ulcer was somewhat pricking in pain. The pain of the ulcer was somewhat pricking in nature. And the patient also gave a history of blood and discharge from the ulcer. For the last 1 month, the patient has been complaining of a gnawing, dull ache in the back, which is aggravated on whenever the patient bends down and is trying to lie down on the bed. And it is becoming more severe for the last week compared to the last visit. Going on to the other history, the patient's past medical history was of not very relevant. She had no history of any diabetes, hypertension, asthma, or any epilepsy. She had attained menopause around 11 years back. And her personal history was, she did not have any habits. Talking about the personal history, it has to be noted that the patient was a sadhvi, that she had gone totally into spiritualism, and she was living in an ashram. She was a widow and she was living by herself alone and without any contact with her family, and she was totally into spiritualism and was living as a sadhvi. So this was something noticeable in her personal history. Going on to the general physical examination, the patient was moderately built, moderately nourished, and she was conscious, cooperative. She was answering all the questions that we were asking, and she was well oriented to time, place, and person. Her temperature, pulse rate, blood pressure, and respiratory rate were all within normal limits. On examination of the right breast, we could palpate multiple nodules or lumps, which was firm to hard in consistency, and it was tender, and it was not freely mobile. It was more fixed to the underlying tissue of the breast. And we could also notice that there was a single deep ulcer adjacent to the on the right breast, around 2 centimeter in diameter, and the edges of the ulcer was everted. The base was firm or hard in consistency, and it was indurated, and there was bleeding and discharge on palpation from the ulcer. And there was an area of excoriation, you could say, adjacent to the, underneath the right breast, extending from the areola region. And the entire breast was tender, and the ulcer was severely tender. And on examination of the left breast, there was nothing noticeable. And on examining the right axilla, there was multiple nodes were palpated, lymph nodes, which were also tender and seemed to be hard in consistency, or you could say firm in consistency and slightly fixed. So the patient had undergone an ultrasound breast mammography, and she had also undergone a PET scan because of her complaint of pain in the back for the last 1 month. So the consulting doctors were suspecting of metastasis to the bone, especially to the spine and the back. The patient had already been advised mastectomy, that is surgical removal followed by chemoradiation, but the patient had totally refused any treatment. Till now, when I had visited the patient also, though they had had multiple visits, the patient had not undergone any treatment. And she said that being a sadhvi, she was not interested in taking up any treatment. And talking about the psychosocial aspects, she was very spiritual, and she was talking that this was something given by God. Let it be a good gift or a bad one, it has to be endured by her. And she was totally willing to go on with it, and she was not having any fear of death. And she was quite religious as well. She was a Hindu saint. And the other constraint, she did have financial constraints because she was a widow living alone by herself in an ashram with no contact with the family. And we had to respect her spiritual constraints as well. Though the medical team was trying to convince her, but she was not willing to come to the hospital also to continue any further treatment. So to manage her pain, initially I think she had taken tramadol, but now for the past 1 week, since the pain was very severe, she was on morphine, 10 mg every 4 hourly. It was oral morphine. And she was also on along with it, she was also given diclofenac, 50 milligram 8 TDS, and paracetamol 650 mg 6 hourly. And she was also given, she was also taking an antidepressant, and she was on antiemetics, and she was on a laxative because she was on continuous morphine. The home care nurse was regularly or periodically doing the wound dressing, and she had told me that the wound had considerably improved compared to the initial stage when there was foul smelling and it was quite fungating. The picture which I have put up here is when I had visited, and she said it was quite better compared to the initial stages. And they were giving a betadine dressing, and she was also giving a topical antibiotic, that is, she was mixing metronidazole powder along with the lignocaine gel, and she was applying it on the wound. And she was giving instructions to the patient to have a regular bath and then to do the dressing prior to the dressing, and to keep the wound clean. So the main concerns in this patient is to counsel the patient, though she seemed to be quite aware of the condition that she is suffering from and the consequences of it. Still, every visit she was explained about the condition, and they were trying to convince her to come to the hospital to take up some kind of treatment or management in regard to the cancer. And they were, but however, they also had, the palliative team had had to also address her spiritual needs, so they couldn't impose on it impose her or force her to get her to the hospital. And they were aiming to improve her quality of life by taking care of her pain and also trying to make the wound heal or doing a proper wound dressing regularly and periodically, and also counsel the patient. So today's patient definitely requires palliative care, and it has to be discussed that what all aspects of palliative care has to be dealt here. And another most important thing that I was really wondering was how to deal with patients when they are totally denial to treatment, knowing about its consequences. And as a palliative care person, we should also have to address and respect the patient's spiritual concerns. So we cannot impose or force somebody into treatment. And overall, we need to also discuss about the managing the patient's total pain, because recently it had the CA breast had metastasized to the and taken care of. Thank you.
Dr. Karpagavalli, we didn't hear the last. I don't know whether it's my problem. Where she had bone metastasis?
She had metastasis to the spine, sir.
Okay. Okay. So, anybody want to comment or want to discuss these 4 questions?
I just have a question for Dr. Karpagavalli, the presenter. You talked about, can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
Yeah, you talked about she was spiritual, she was into spirituality. Did that help with her pain relief? Was there any, when you spoke to her, did you feel that her belief in God helped her with that, with her pain, or I
Yeah,
mean, just a question I just was wondering.
yes, ma'am. She seemed to be aware of what is going on with her, and though there was some amount of pain, she was not complaining too much of it. Actually, she was able to endure it because of her belief that it is something given by God, and she should not go against God. If she strongly felt that taking a treatment was something going against God, because it was given something by God, and she should not go ahead and take active treatment.
But
So even the pain aspect, we need to really sit and counsel her and convince her to take the opioid medications.
But with counseling, she was willing to take opioid medications for the pain.
Yes.
With the counseling. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else has any comments on this?
Ma'am, could we take any help from her spiritual gurus or somebody whom she confided in the same ashram to make her understand and get over her spiritual reservations to agree for the treatment? Was it right?
I'm not sure, because I think they had spoken to some caretaker in the ashram, and they had also told that we don't pressurize anybody to do something, but we have given her that she is not bound by anything of their say, that she is at her free will to do it actually. And she said that she had come to this ashram on her own will, and she was a widow, and she had totally lost contact with her family, and she said that she had given up all the materialistic likings of life, and she was totally into um, uh, like a sadhvi, like just leading a very simple life, just thinking about God.
There just might be a probability that her family might have abandoned her because of which she was here. And then the economic constraints because of being dependent on the ashram or the trust for her daily needs. Maybe that was another reason which she could not get over, that she was denying treatment as a whole.
It could be, ma'am, it could be. But to what I was able to uh, note from it, she didn't seem to be bound by anything actually. She seemed to be quite a bold lady also. She was not a very weak person, I would say, mentally, from the way we were able to talk to her. She seemed to be a quite strong person.
Does she know that she has cancer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So nobody doubts about this patient need palliative care, which we were discussing for the last 3 or 4 sessions. And denial, I don't know what do you mean, but denial is something when the patient knows doesn't or knows about cancer, but doesn't seems to accept what we are proposing, or she's hindrance to what we are if we tell that okay, this you need some pain medications, or you need treatment, and the patient will deny that no, I don't have any cancer,
No, this patient
this
doesn't.
is only an ulcer.
She was not in denial. She was denying the treatment. She was
Okay.
not in denial.
Okay.
Understand? Denial is like they don't want to accept the fact that they are having cancer.
Yeah. Here the patient knows that she has cancer. Okay.
She's well
So
aware of
she's not in denial, but she's denying other treatments. But the problem is that we have to also look this patient from an ethical perspective. So if you look at from an ethical point of view, we have there are 4 main ethical principles. That is autonomy, that is respecting the patient wish, which is the overriding principle in ethics. Here the patient knows about everything about the cancer, and you have also talked about the treatment which requires, and what are the consequences if you don't do any treatment. So after proper explanation, and if the patient denies or patient don't want any treatment, so we need not push that again and again, but we can leave the door open, saying that if you ever want to talk about this later, please ask us. uh, this is what we can do. And regarding the it is very important to respect the patient's spiritual concerns or religious wishes. Here the patient is from a Hindu religion, and she believes in that maybe God and goddesses, etc. But somebody with other religious inclination may not be a proper person to address these spiritual issues. In such situation, what we can do is just hear or listen to what they are talking. That's what we can do, and take the help of somebody from that ashram to talk to this person. Then they have the same spiritual or religious concepts. So that's what we can do in this patient. And bone metastasis is something which will be which we have to manage with different modalities of treatment. If radiotherapy is possible, that would be the better choice, because 1 or 5 fractions of radiotherapy will help the patient's spines to stabilize, and that will also help to reduce the pain. But if that is patient is not willing, we have to manage with other medications. Maybe the management what you are currently doing is good enough, and maybe later, if the patient goes for spinal cord compression, I don't know, but then steroids might be required, and there would be some neuropathic pain. So neuropathic pain medications has to be added. That will depend on what the problem with what problem is going to cause with the spine metastasis. And even bisphosphonates like zoledronic acid can be used, but pain relief is not immediate. It will take some weeks for pain relief. So basically, we have to depend on opioids for pain relief in this patient, along with non-opioids and adjuvant analgesics.
And for the wound, what else, like in between till the dressing, like I think the nurse goes once a week or once and twice a week. I'm not very clear about it, sir. But in between, what can be done for self-dressing of the wound?
Okay, from the photo, I see that the wound is very clean. So you can ask.
The time when I went, there had been multiple dressings regularly being done by the nurse, sir. Home care. So
Okay.
she was telling it was in a very bad state, and now it is really healing up. Actually, you can see the granulation tissue coming up.
Okay, this wound is cancerous wound, so it is not going to heal. What we can do is we can only prevent the foul smell and worsening of the wound. So if there is any foul smell, you have to either apply metronidazole powder, or you can even give metronidazole orally.
They were using that metronidazole powder, and they were mixing it with lignocaine gel and applying it.
Yeah, okay. If there is foul smell, you can ask them to take metronidazole orally. I think our time has exceeded, and I think we have to finish today's session. So thank you, Dr. Karpagavalli,
Thank you.
and thank you all for your interactions. Thank you. We'll see you when, Rajalakshmi?
So we will not be having a session on coming Tuesday on regards to Onam occasion. So we can meet on next Thursday with a topic on medical ethics taken by Dr. M.R. Rajan.
There was a question on codeine and oxycodone. We don't have oxycodone in India. Codeine is not usually used now. It is a weak opioid. It is very costly. So nobody uses codeine now. But in case of cough, some people use codeine. I have used previously, but now we don't use it.
But oxycodone is used in for overseas.
Yeah, it is used, but we don't have any experience with oxycodone.
Because actually recently my father had a hip fracture in Australia, and he was admitted and had to undergo the treatment there.
Yeah.
So that time they had put him on oxycodone. So I was with him through the entire treatment. So I was really wondering.
I don't know about oxycodone. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.